All right, test 2, section 1, first passage here. So this is going to be your fiction passage. Usually in these, if there's anything that you can get from the little blurb at the top, usually it'd be like character names and things like that. This one, it is talking about, it's from Charlotte Bronte. It's The Professor, so probably a professor here in this passage. And it was originally published in 1857, so I can just give you a little bit of context. It doesn't give you any of the character names, but at least it gives you some context of what's going on. We're talking about a professor in 1857. Alright, so the first question you would do here, you'll see number 1 is going to say which choice best summarizes the passage. So again, the way I do these, I do go in order from 1 through 10. That does not mean you should be doing 1 first. I mean, you should normally be doing 1 last, but just in order of being able to kind of keep track of the questions that you want to find in the video, I'm going to start with number 10. So number 1, again, is the main idea, what summarizes the passage. And what you have to be able to do is, after you've answered all these questions, get an idea of how this passage progressed. Now, luckily, some of the questions ask how different paragraphs progress and things like that. So at the beginning of the passage, he's talking about how he's very unhappy with his job. He's just kind of dumbfounded at the situation at this point. And then he starts talking about the issues he has with his boss, and that kind of starts in the second paragraph, and some of the issues that they have. So he starts off in general, just talking about I have this terrible job. Second paragraph, he kind of go into a little bit more detail. He doesn't really say very many positive things about him, or really at the very end, he talks about, we had that question about his lodgings, and those aren't very good either. So the passage ends on a sour note as well. But really the passage is about him, his job, and his coworker, and how much it stinks. So with that being said, you take a look at your answer choices. Answer choice A says a character describes his dislike for his new job and considers the reason why. So he does dislike, he describes his dislike, considers the reasons why, possibly, yeah, he does go through some things there. Answer choice B says we have 2 characters employed in the same office become increasingly competitive. I'm really not sure about this increasingly competitive piece, so I'm not going to say that. Also, the other guy is like his boss, so we're just talking about 2 characters employed in the same office. We're not really mentioning the fact that the other guy is his boss, so it's not going to be B. C says a young man regrets privately a choice that he defends publicly. Now, he does regret privately a choice that he made. Defending publicly doesn't really get into any of that, so that part doesn't seem to match. D says a new employee experiences optimism. Now, he did used to think of Edward Crimsworth as a brother, which means he was like a sympathetic ally, one of the other questions that we did. Then frustration, and finally despair. This does seem to match, but again, when you think of the way the passage progresses, it doesn't really progress with him being optimistic. It's just barely mentioned that he was optimistic at first, so I wouldn't really call that the best choice to summarize the passage, because that's not really how the passage progresses. He's really unhappy throughout the passage. So in this case, answer choice A is going to be your best option for number 1. Number 2 says the main purpose of the opening sentence of the passage. So I'm going to go look and see what's the main purpose of the opening sentence. So here it is. And I'm trying to get the main purpose. No man likes to acknowledge that he has made a mistake. So in the choice of his profession, and every man worthy of his name will row long against wind and tide before he allows himself to cry out, I am baffled, and submits to be floated passively back to land. So again, when you read these lines, what we're trying to do is figure out the main purpose. What's the point? And it seems like the point is, to me, and again, you can take your own swing at it, but obviously we want to be somewhere on the same page here. But it seems like he is very unhappy, and the main point is to kind of show not just that he's unhappy, but how unhappy he is. He almost seems like he doesn't even know what to do anymore. It's not just a little bit of frustration, it's a lot of frustration. So I would kind of look at this as really showing exactly how terrible his job is. So then I'd just go look at my answer choices and see which is the best option here. The Does it establish the narrator's perspective? Yeah. On a controversy? No. So this one is starting to look good, but it's not really about a controversy. There's really no controversy here. He doesn't like his job. B says provide context. Yes. Useful in understanding the narrator's emotional state. Yes. So again, all the answer has to match for it to work. So that one looks good. C, does it offer a symbolic representation of Edward Crimsworth's plight? I don't see the symbolism here. Maybe a little bit with rowing long and hard and all that stuff, but it's really not going to be better than answer choice B anyway, because that's not the main purpose. So that's not going to be an answer either. And then D says contrasts the narrator's good intentions. I don't know where the good intentions were. Maybe he tried to have a good job. I don't know, with his malicious conduct, and malicious doesn't seem to fit this passage. So I'm not going to pick D. B is going to be your best answer for number 2. Number 3 says, during the course of the first paragraph, the narrator's focus shifts from. So we have to, as we read this entire paragraph, what we want to do is look for that shift. So you want to find it. It's a long paragraph. I'm not going to read the entire thing just so you're aware. That would take a while, but you can read it, and that's what you should be doing when you do this question. Now, as you read it, and we started reading already, you'll see he just talks about at first that he doesn't like his job. And as you keep going, he says, I found my occupation irksome. As you keep going, I should have endured in silence and rust. He's just describing, as he goes through all of this, he's just talking about how his job is terrible. So if you're reading all this information, his job is bad, his job is bad, his job is bad. Now, the next piece is where the transition comes. So really the best part, maybe where that transition occurs, is going to be somewhere around like 26, 27. But this was not all. The antipathy which had sprung up between myself and my employer, striking deeper root and spreading denser shade daily, excluded me from every glimpse of the sunshine of life. And I began to feel like a plant growing in human darkness out of the slimy walls of a well. So at this point, this is where he starts to kind of explain maybe why exactly he doesn't like his job. He has issues with his boss, or his employer specifically. So he doesn't like. It's not like he doesn't like his job because it's boring or he's just unhappy in general. He's just unhappy with his employer. So there's specific reasons why. So he goes into to that, and that's where the main shift is going to be. So then you want to go to your answer choices and take a look and see which one will kind of tell you something like that. But again, you read this whole paragraph looking for some sort of shift, so you're looking for it. Makes it easier to find something when you're actually looking for it. So is it a recollection of past confidence to acknowledgement of present self-doubt? He seems like he is really not making that transition. You can maybe make that assumption that maybe that's how he's felt in the past and how he is now. But again, the paragraph is not following that depiction, so it's not going to be A. B says, is it a reflection on his expectations? There's no here about a reflection on expectations. He was unhappy from the very beginning in this paragraph, so it's not B. C says a generalization about job dissatisfaction. He does talk about a generalization about how he doesn't like his job to the specifics of his own situation. Yeah, that seems like what he's doing, so I'm going to keep that. Is it an evaluation of factors making him unhappy to identification of alternatives? That second piece doesn't seem to fit. So number 3 is going to be C. Number 4, the references to shade and darkness at the end of the first paragraph mainly have which effect? So we have these references. We're trying to see what effect those references have. Okay, so now that you've read it, you understand it. Now we can go read what effect do these references have. So what's really the point of them using these words? So here, said the antipathy which had sprung up between myself and my employer, striking deeper root. So we got deeper root and spreading denser shade daily. So we have deeper root and denser shade. And he's talking about the antipathy that had sprung up between him and his employer. So the bad feelings and things like that. It excluded me from every glimpse of the sunshine of life. So the way they're using these words is showing how just really how bad things are. He's using these as to kind of exemplify just how bad his job situation is. And I began to feel like a plant growing in humid darkness. That makes it even worse, I guess, out of the slimy walls of a well. So this is really just him really trying to get the point across of how bad things really are. So again, when you look at this question, you're trying to see what effect does it have. I think it has the effect of really exemplifying the severity of the situation that he's in. So then I would read the answer choices and see which ones match that. Does it evoke the narrator's sense of dismay? I would say, yeah, it does evoke his sense of dismay. That seems to fit, so I would keep that. Does it reflect the narrator's sinister thoughts? I don't think about sinister thoughts here. It's not like he's really thinking some really creepy things about what he's going to do to his employer. No. So it's not going to be B. Do they capture the narrator's fear? Yes. Of confinement? No. This part doesn't seem to fit. It does start to fit, but it doesn't at the end. Every word's got to match. D says they reveal the narrator's longing for rest. I don't know about that one. He doesn't say anything about resting. So A is going to be your best answer for number 4. Number 5, the passage indicates that Edward Crimsworth's behavior was mainly caused by his what? So in this case, you notice there is no line referenced here, but we are not obviously doing a main idea question. So this is going to have to show up somewhere after number 4. So you'll see in my passage, I have number 5 in that next paragraph. Somewhere in there, you're going to find the answer to number 5. So again, what are we looking for? The passage indicates that Edward Crimsworth's behavior, his behavior, was caused by what? So what caused his behavior? So you would have to read this paragraph and find where he talks about what maybe causes his behavior. So some of the things that might stand out as you read this is stuff like this, where he says how my southern accent annoyed him. That might cause his behavior. The degree of education evinced in my language irritated him. My punctuality, industry, and accuracy fixed his dislike and gave it the high flavor and poignant relish of envy. And that seems to kind of summarize that. He feared that I would too should one day make a successful tradesman. So he feared that he'd be successful. So it seems like at this point he seems to be kind of jealous of him. That's the way, obviously, the author is, or the narrator is expressing it, and that's really what we have to follow. So it seems like he is kind of saying how he's jealous of him. So we want to see an answer that kind of says that. So I already see jealousy as an answer choice down here. That may be good, but remember, everything's got to fit, not just one word. Impatience with his high spirits? No, it's not impatience. Scorn? No, scorn is not really jealous. Indignation of his rash actions? No. So it better be D. Jealousy of his apparent superiority? Yes. So 5 is going to be D. You just got to know where to look, and if you look in the right spot, you should find the answer pretty easily. So that's number 5. Number 6 said the passage indicates that when the narrator began working for Edward Crimsworth, he viewed him as a blank. So for number 6, we have to look at the evidence for number 7. We have to know what to look for. So what I would look for here, when the narrator began working for Edward Crimsworth, he viewed him as a what? So we have to see an answer choice that kind of talks about when he first met him. So to jump to the answers on this, what you'd want to do is read. I'm just going to kind of jump to the evidence so you can see it. So it's going to be somewhere towards the end, right here on line 61 and 62, where it says, I had long ceased. Now, when you say I had long ceased, that means probably a long time ago, I used to feel the way he's about to say. Okay, I had long ceased to regard Mr. Crimsworth as my brother. So this is the statement we're looking at. That is going to be, and this is line 61. So just to show you, this is the evidence we'd be looking for. as you go through each one, you're trying to look and see which one obviously is talking about how you used to feel about him. Now, you used to feel about him as a brother. So usually in the context of that, the way he's wording that, a brother or somebody is like family, someone that you really care about. So you used to really care about him, or used to think of him as somebody that he would care about. So harmless rival, if you think of someone as your brother, you can maybe try to jump to maybe there were rivals, but you wouldn't use that word if you were talking about a harmless rival. You would use "you're my brother" as if you're like my friend, you're family to me. I care about you a lot. So that doesn't fit very well, actually, in this context. A sympathetic ally, I would say like an ally is like somebody you trust, who's a friend of yours. So I would keep that. A perceptive judge, no, it's not a brother. Demanding mentor is not your brother. So B is going to be your best answer for number 6. And that matches, again, the evidence for 7, which is D. Moving on to 8, at the end of the second paragraph, the comparisons of abstract qualities to a lynx and a snake mainly have what effect? So, again, we're going to go to the end of that paragraph, okay? And when we do that, we're looking at them to be mentioning things about the abstract qualities of a lynx and a snake. So when you go down here, we're going to look and somewhere in here, and I'll start actually with if he could. So if he could have if he could have once placed me in a ridiculous or mortifying position, he would have forgiven me much. But I was guarded. I was guarded by 3 faculties: caution, tact, observation. And the prowling and prying, as was Edward's malignity, it could never baffle. So again, it could never baffle the lynx eyes of these my natural sentinels. Day by day did his malice watch my tact, hoping it would sleep, and prepared to steal, snake-like, on its slumber. But tact, if it be genuine, never sleeps. So this, obviously, this is really talking about, I would say he's almost a little over cautious, it seems. I mean, he thinks as soon as I sleep, he's going to take advantage of me, and maybe it is because he seems to be pretty down about his job, but it's really showing this adversarial relationship between the two. And again, he really wants to emphasize just how big this adversarial relationship actually is. He's really trying to emphasize that, just like he really tries to emphasize at the beginning of the passage how terrible his job is. That seems to be the author's way of writing here, is really over the top. So in this case, I would look at this as really showing how strong that relationship really is, in a bad way, and I think I probably used some of the words in the answer, but that is a good way of, sometimes you get that lucky, but sometimes you don't. It just depends. But we are looking to show, he's trying to show exactly how much they are really adversaries. They're not just, it's not just some guy you don't like. This is pretty intense. So as you go in here, you got contrasting 2 hypothetical courses of action. No, he's trying to emphasize something. Does it convey the ferocity? This seems to match, but not of a resolution. That word doesn't match. So it's not B. Does it suggest the likelihood of an altercation? Maybe there's an altercation, but suggesting the likelihood? No. Does it illustrate the nature of an adversarial relationship? Yes, yes. So D is going to be your answer for number 8. So that's 8. Number 9 says the passage indicates that after a long day, so again, after a long day of work, the narrator sometimes found his living quarters to be what? So we were looking for something that says after a long day, and then sometimes, so it's not always. So that's another key when you're looking at the evidence. He's not going to say all the time. He's not going to say his living quarters is always this way or always that way. That wouldn't be good. It's sometimes his living quarters is what. So as we look at the evidence here, I'm just going to jump to the proper evidence so you can see what it should look like. So it's going to be the last piece right here. And again, we should be looking for something, again, after a long day, my living quarters is sometimes like what? So here it says, I walked fast for it was a cold, frosty night in January. So that would be a clue that maybe it's the end of a long day. As I approach my lodgings, so like my home, I turn from a general view of my affairs to the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. So sometimes it might be out, sometimes it may not. So again, it's not anything certain. So that's another key about the narrator sometimes found his living quarters to be what? Looking toward the window of my sitting room, I saw no cheering red gleam. So that means that his fire's out. So it's probably not going to be a very fun place to go in on a cold, frosty night. So it's going to be cold and like blah and just not good. Cold and dark, you know. So that's how he would find his lodge sometimes. So if you found that evidence, you know the evidence then would be D. Is it treacherous? That means like dangerous. I would not say dangerous. Is it dreary? Yeah, cold and dark. It's probably dreary. Predictable? No, because it's not always going to be that way. He wasn't sure what it would be like. He just had to look and see. Intolerable? Possibly. You know, if I was looking at these two, intolerable is probably a little too strong. It's not like you can't live there. It's just not a very fun place. That's really more how it's being described. So that's going to be B. And as I said, that is number 9 and number 10 for passage 1 and test 2.